Welcome back to the Mental Dietitian Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Lynch-potter, and today I've got my very dear friend, Gabriel Shaw, on the podcast. He is somebody I've known for a few years now, and we have had some very deep experiences together. He is a good friend of a long-time friend of mine, Marcus, who's been on this podcast. We did an amazing podcast, and if you enjoyed his podcast, you're going to absolutely love this one. Gabe is a coach. He's a kinesiologist. He's a Tai Chi instructor. He originally got into Tai Chi when he was about 13, and he's going to just talk about that. And something that I was saying before I even started the podcast is I've always admired his ability to step into the more feminine side of himself. And a lot of men have a very hard time with that. And something I've always admired about Gabe. And I'm so excited to have you on the podcast, man. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Aaron. I'm really happy to be here. Happy to spend the time with you and hopefully help some of the listeners as well.
Absolutely. I know you will. You've got a very unique story, which is basically that's what I get started with every time I have somebody on the show. Tell us a little bit about you. I know that you grew up in the States. You grew up in America, yeah, in the Midwest, I'm pretty sure. What state were you in?
I was born in California
Yep.
until I was about 10 years old, and then I moved to Colorado and spent the majority of my upbringing in Colorado, um, from about 10 to 20 years old, and then went to California following a Tai Chi and Qigong and Kung Fu teacher out to California. That's where I did my paramedic training. Then I went back to Colorado for a couple of years before coming to Canada.
When did you come to Canada?
Came to Canada almost 10 years ago. Almost
Wow.
10 years ago. Yeah. So it's been a while in Canada and made my home in Canada now. And now I'm a dual citizen. And I really appreciate that.
Awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Tell us about your journey. What would inspire a 13-year-old to get into Tai Chi and Qigong? Because it seems like when I see it, it's older Asian people, mostly because I live in Vancouver and there's a lot of Asian people that are kind of the demographic, but I see them doing it in parks and it's this beautiful kind of slow, connective movement with oneself. But
Yeah.
what's a 13-year-old in Colorado doing Qigong?
Yeah. Thanks. So, that's an interesting thing. And in a way, I got kind of lucky. I really started it because it was being taught at my Kung Fu school.
Mm.
So growing up as a kid, I always had a fascination with the Ninja Turtles, the Power Rangers, different kind of martial artists, Bruce Lee, those kinds of things, martial arts movies. And a buddy of mine, a close friend of mine, I mean, it's one of the biggest blessings in my life, honestly, that a really close friend of mine, we'd always done martial arts, kind of like play fighting stuff. We were kids together, and he kind of pulled me aside one day and said, "Hey, I'm going to go check out this Kung Fu school because I want to start doing martial arts. But my dad says, and if I'm going to do it, I have to have a friend to do it with me so that I don't come home and try to beat him up." And so I'm wondering if you want to come and do this class with me. And I was like, yeah, sure. That was awesome. And we went to our first Kung Fu class, and Kung Fu is much more external along that more masculine side. Like you kind of said at the beginning, a lot more kicks and punches and fighting and acrobatics. But we did our first class, and I was hooked after that. Like it was just like after that one class, like I remember even coming home that day and practicing that day, even afterward. And it was just like, I just knew right from then that like, okay, this is what I'm meant to be doing. Like, this is exactly what I was looking for. This is what I'm meant to be doing. In that Kung Fu school, they also taught Tai Chi and Qigong and meditation as sort of an aside thing that they did. But in order to get your black belt, you had to do some Tai Chi and Qigong. You had to be able to be certified in Tai Chi and Qigong with them, which just meant you knew the basic forms and knew the basic meditations. And so that's really how I got into it. But then what I found in my practice, and thankfully, got connected with some really good teachers and stuff over the years, what I found was the Kung Fu I felt was like a mile wide, but an inch deep. where the Kung Fu lineage I was doing, we did a whole bunch of different styles. Every month was a different thing, and we didn't really go that deep into any of them. But when I found the Tai Chi and the Qigong was just a mile deep. Like it was just there's so much depth, so much introspection, so much like minor details of things to really learn and chew your teeth on. And it's like a healing art and a martial art and a spiritual cultivation practice. So I fell in love with that. And I'll share another story, which I don't usually talk about publicly, but we might end up talking about plant medicines later on today. So I will share that really I got inspired with a love of Tai Chi and Qigong going to class high on marijuana.
Oh yeah, dude. That'd be
And
awesome.
all through my teenage years, my best friend Jordan and I would be going to, our Tai Chi classes high and just having that flow, getting into that flow state where you're really letting your physical body fall away and moving energy and flowing. And it was like just ever since I started feeling that and really truly like the plant medicine, like that wasn't really respectful use at the time, but it was medicinal use, and that it really did help me dive deeper into like a deeper layer of consciousness that got me started with a love for Tai Chi Qigong that has always stayed.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And like, I mean, it kind of was a plant medicine, dude. Like like
Yeah.
to use it in that way to explore your own consciousness in a very, is very nice. Like you're not, I don't know. I don't see anything wrong with that at all. At all. I think that's beautiful. And I've exercised. I've done jujitsu, stoned before, high on marijuana. Fucking amazing, amazing times. So it's very somatic, and you get in your own body, and it feels really good. And I can imagine, I can imagine that doing qigong or tai chi would be amazing. Real quick for the people that are listening, what is the difference between qigong and tai chi?
So qigong is an umbrella term. Qi meaning energy or breath or life, and gong is the same gong as in kung fu, same thing. It means so qigong just means like energy work or like
Yeah,
breath work or like breath practice.
yeah,
Um, but it's really a modern term that's meant to describe a whole host of different traditional Chinese medical and Taoist practices for self cultivation, for health cultivation, for spiritual cultivation. So you could say that Tai Chi is one type of Qigong.
okay,
There are many different Qigong lineages and styles and teachers and systems and philosophies and rules, but Tai Chi, particularly the style I do is Yang Family Tai Chi, is like one specific type of Qigong with a specific lineage, with a specific set of principles, with specific goals, which also includes martial arts. And so, yeah, you could say Tai Chi is one type of Qigong. When people talk about Qigong, they don't always include the martial arts aspect, and there's, a whole martial arts aspect of the Tai Chi as well. So that's kind of the difference, the basic difference between Tai Chi and Qigong.
cool. So how long have you been doing it now? Over 20 years.
Over 20 years. Yeah.
Wow. What's the biggest thing that it has taught you? I know this is a kind of it's not a dumb question, but it's probably a hard question to answer. What's the biggest thing that it's taught you about yourself?
What's the biggest thing that it's taught me about myself? I think that the biggest thing that it's taught me is that your physiology is under your control.
Mm,
your your mind is under your control, your physiology is under your control. There are things you can do that are very, very easy to do, relatively easy to learn, where you can relax your body, you can calm your mind, you can focus your mind. uh, you can release tension, long held tension and pain in the body using your mind. You can shift the way you think using the body. And this profound connection between the mind and body in that way, and how much you can really use your mind or your intention to control how you feel is, probably the biggest, most fundamental thing that I think people learn from it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's basically just allowing people to express themselves in a very gentle, a beautiful way where they can connect. They can kind of get out of their head and get and connect the mind and the body. But I've never done it. I mean, we mentioned before we got started that you showed me a few things, and I was able to. You had your hands on my hips that time, and I remember I felt uncomfortable. I felt uncomfortable. I'll be honest, and probably a lot of people that you have done it with probably feel uncomfortable at the start because it's a very intimate, gentle experience, and most men don't have that with other men in a non-sexual way. They just
Yeah.
don't, and that's what. And but I felt like connected to you. It's very interesting. Like we were like rotating at the same time. Like, do you feel that? And I felt it for a second. It was very interesting. I felt it, and I was like, whoa, that was cool. Like this,
Yeah.
like we were in resonance. I was like mirroring you. It was very
Yeah.
interesting. But then I lost it because of my own shame at the time and my own like, oh, this is uncomfortable. But it's. I was thinking about that recently, and I was thinking about that before we even got started. Is that the biggest thing that you notice when you're teaching people these movement modalities? Is is it the shame? Is it like what is it within people that it stops them from
Yeah.
moving?
So yeah, you said it basically, is that it's very intimate. It's very intimate, and the work that you and I were doing together was part of the martial arts practice, which is about joining energy and learning how to resonate and join energy that way with a partner, which is good for martial arts and healing and self cultivation and all kinds of things. But it's also really very, very intimate in yourself. And so if you come to my class, I'm going to ask you to slow down. And I'm going to ask you to move very, very slowly. And I'm going to ask you to pay very, very close attention to your stored tension. And you can imagine, yeah, as soon as people slow down, when they, especially when they start to imagine like getting connected to that stored tension, there's a lot of discomfort that's there. And so for some people, yeah, it could be shame. For a lot of people, it's anxiety. For a lot of people, it's pain. And that is not only physical pain, but also the pain that they have stored in their emotions in their bodies so they don't feel it, is now coming out, or they're being forced to face that. Um, we store our pain, our stress, our emotions in our body as like stagnant energy. And the only way to really move those blockages is to feel them. And so 'cause sometimes slowing down and being that intimate with yourself is very, very difficult. And when you talked about it's the connection between the mind and the body, in Tai Chi, we use a method called the three Dantian method, or the three energy centers method, which is really connecting your mind, your heart, and your body, or your third eye center, your heart center, and your belly center. And so you really learning the connection between how you think, your emotions, and how you feel in your physical body. And it can be beautiful when you can learn to allow yourself to feel those things, because that's really how you tap into the energy work, and that's really how you can unlock tremendous amounts of energy, because you can start to let those blockages go, those stored up knots of energy, you can let them go, and then everything can flow. And then when you can do that, you can drop into this layer I was talking about earlier, which is really a deeper layer of consciousness, where you start to realize the things that we think are just physical, stuck structures aren't. Everything in the world is fluid, everything is relational. So it's really beautiful when we can get to that, but there's a price for admission there, which is that you do have to be willing at some level to face some of those tensions and let some of those tensions go.
Yeah, it's funny because I mentioned before we got started that I'm really been invited by life to sit with heavy shame right now, and it's it's very difficult and very very difficult, very interesting emotion, the opposite of love. The It's a emotional cancer in a way where it multiplies and it wants to hide and it doesn't want you to see it and it'll tell you lies and it'll all kinds of things. And I can imagine that if I did Tai Chi, that would come up, because for a lot of my life, I, growing up in Australia, being a young man, I used to love playing the clarinet, and I loved crystals, and I loved growing my orchids. I grew orchids as a kid. And I was about 10, 11, 12 years old. But that's not okay when you're 13, 14, and all the cool guys are they're playing football and they're playing sports, and then you become a shame around that. And that's the story for a lot of men. I know it is.
Mhm.
They reach a point where they start going through puberty, and it's no longer okay to do what they did when they were little kids, and it's no longer okay for girls to beat them, which then
Yeah.
starts a lot of shame around the feminine. Which, are you going to let a girl beat you? But when you're like 6, 7 years old and all the kids are playing soccer and it's a mixed team, that's okay. But if you're 14, 15, not okay anymore. Not okay anymore. So that's something that I really, like I said, I've said a few times, I really admire that about you, because you're doing it in a world where that a lot of men have a really hard time with that. And I've had a hard time with it in the past. I didn't think I did, but I did.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really admire that with you. And next time in Victoria, I definitely would like to do a class with you, even though it's going to be uncomfortable. But
Yeah.
I think it's time to explore and slow down. And like, we just live in a world that is so fast, man. Like,
Yeah.
it's so fast. Just slowing down to the speed of your soul it can be very difficult, very, very difficult. And to start that at such a young age. Here's another thing. I know you came from quite a religious background, and to go into the more Eastern kind of mentality, was there any backlash from your environment or your parents, or what? Tell us about that.
Yeah, big time, big time. Well, let me first say on what you said before is that, I almost said when you asked what is the, you know, best thing it's taught you or what the most important thing it's taught you, I kind of went with the first thing that it teaches you, but really the more deeper thing or the other thing I was going to say is it really teaches how to harmonize yin and yang. That's the whole purpose of Tai Chi, is really to learn how to harmonize yin and yang. And we think about yin and yang, we think about sometimes people think about those as the masculine and the feminine. This has nothing to do with like sex or gender, because we all have masculine and feminine energies within us. And so if we are exiling, let's say, our feminine as a man, or as a woman you're masculine, or it could be the vice versa, by the way. Like, I've
Oh
known
yeah.
men who have exiled their masculine, and I've known
Oh yeah.
women who have exiled their feminine. So but if you're exiling either one of those, then you're really just exiling a part of yourself. If you're angry at men, angry at women, you're really angry at a part of yourself, or not accepting a part of yourself. And it's important to learn how to be strong and be soft.
Yeah.
It's important to learn how to have structure and have fluidity.
Yeah.
And I think, and actually, both of them, both of those two support the other. Actually, the more soft you can be, the stronger you can be. I'm sure you've found that in jujitsu. High
Yep.
level jujitsu players are super soft
Very
and
nice,
fluid.
caring people usually. Like the most dangerous black belts I've ever met are very soft spoken. There's something very peaceful about them.
But even in their play, even in their grappling, there's a fluidity, there's a relaxation. They can flow with it. And you see a white belt or even a blue belt, oftentimes they're quite stiff. And that's often one of the biggest differences you see, right? At the same time, it can't be all fluidity, because you do have to be able to do the technique. You do have to have that structure of that shape and that form of being like, you have to channel that in fluidity into a direction for it to become like power, right? So they really do both support each other. The stronger you can be, the softer you can be, the softer you can be, the stronger you can be. So that's, I think that, that's, I think, the deepest really the deepest thing. And that's something I'm always constantly trying to learn. And this is why I continue to practice these arts. But yeah, in my house, I came from a very religious house, and I was very religious. And part of my conversion away from Christianity was what I was learning in the Buddhist art of Kung Fu and the Taoist arts of Tai Chi and Qigong. And along with, friend influences I had at the time, and just trying to study other things and things like that. And It's ironic now because what I look at my dad as one of the biggest gifts he's ever given me is the disciplined study of spirituality and the disciplined approach to finding God in everyday life and having your study and making that a very serious part of one's life. And that I was just doing that same thing. I was just doing exactly that, and I was just interested, and I just wanted to learn about spirituality and these different practices, these different traditions, in the same way that he had cultivated that sense of that discipline, the spiritual discipline in me. But it was, of course, a different one than he thought was right, and he was just worried. I mean, this is just a guy who's worried about his son's health and soul. And so, but yeah, it definitely there was some clash there for sure. And
Imagine.
yeah, and in general, I think, Christianity and, the way it was taught to me, by my dad, but also by the church and the theology I learned at the time was really damaging to me in a lot of ways. And talk about a shame over your feminine. The church that I grew up in, it wasn't taught. I didn't get the message that my feminine parts were okay by them, right? So, or others, different people of sexual orientations and different things like that. And so, yeah, so it did take me a lot of healing around that, and I'm still, working through aspects of that. But I have also gotten to a place where, for the most part, I can take the baby out of the bathwater there, and I can see what people are trying to do, where they're trying to get to this close personal relationship with God. And I can see that's part of the beauty of what Jesus brought to Western cultures, is the idea that you can have a personal relationship with the divine and doesn't have to be mediated through priests and synagogues and temples. And that's a beautiful message, And so I do try to take the baby with the bathwater as much as I can.
Yeah. Yeah, I know part of your journey, a lot of healing around that. And kind of wanted me to get to the place, like obviously we met in a plant kind of medicine ceremony. And that's how we have such a deep relationship, because we've gone to very deep places together. I've seen you and you've seen me in some really vulnerable states and some really heavy stuff that we've both dealt with. And how did you get started? I mean, I know that you were doing qigong, high on marijuana, but when did that transition to maybe a more therapeutic setting, like a retreat or something like that, or you used it as these tools? And how old were you?
Yeah, so I um used marijuana, maybe you could say as a medicinal way in Tai Chi, and to some degree it was, but also, disrespectfully or not ceremonially, in a recreational context, as a teenager, just overusing it,
Mhm.
and even into my early 20s. And also in my late teens, early 20s, I also experimented with other recreational drugs and had some profound experiences, by the way, like had some generally very safe, generally very loving experiences, also in mind opening, expanding experiences recreationally, and also really psychologically dangerous at times. Like I had some really, really bad times as well. And this is something I think there's so many people out there wanting to serve medicine or help people in this space. And I think it is a prerequisite, if you're going to be helping people in the space, that you have been like um, put through the cleaners and know what that can be like. And I definitely have had some times that were really detrimental to me psychologically in my early 20s as well, doing that. And I think that's a valuable part of my learning now. But I definitely got to a place where I just didn't want to kind of mess with it anymore, because
Yeah.
once you've had those bad trips, the door is always kind of open to that, you
Very
know.
scary, very
And
scary
it can be
stuff.
it can be scary, yeah. And but what I did do, and so I kind of started putting that stuff aside when I started going to EMT school to become an emergency medical technician and work in ambulances and stuff. So I kind of started putting that stuff aside when I started going that route. But what I also started doing at the same time as that is started going to Burning Man.
Mm.
And Burning Man has been a huge part of my self cultivation, my education, my spiritual cultivation, because I've learned from some of the world's great masters in Tai Chi and yoga and sound healing and Tantra, in art and, shamanic journeying through being connected to that Burning Man. But so usually basically throughout my whole 20s, I would go to Burning Man every year. And usually at Burning Man was the time in which I would do, like, usually one type of time a year, have um, a psychedelic experience.
Yep. Yep.
And Burning Man is a place that is not necessarily, or was, and it's starting to shift, but definitely at that time, and it still probably still is now, it was the safest place to do those things and the most mind expansive place to do those things that I had encountered, and that I think anybody could really bring to me outside of a, really, really structured, really good guided ceremonial context. Because at Burning Man, really, there's so much support there for you. If you're having a bad trip, there's support, there's medical support. I volunteered with the medical team every year I went. So there's medical support. There's also just other just friendly people who know what you're going through, who can invite you into their camp. Everybody wants you to come into their camp and engage. Every art piece out there, camp is designed for you. They'd love for you to come off the playa and engage with their art piece or their camp or whatever. So it's a very welcoming, loving, safe environment. Not safe in the way where there's bumpers on everything, not safe as in coddled, but safe as in if you fall down, there's people will pick you up,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I would usually have like a once a year experience there at Burning Man. And those were always some of the most transformational, like transcendent healing times. And I do include Burning Man as sort of my entrance into the psychedelic healing ceremonial space, because when
Sure.
I first got connected with um, psychedelic community that we're a part of, like our community here that you and I are a part of, and we've been connected through some of our other friends who've been on this podcast. My first experience there, maybe you were even there too. Yeah, you were there too at my first experience there. Immediately, I was like, "Oh, this feels like Running Man."
Mm.
Like if there's something that feels very similar, even though we were going deeper and we were going more into shadow and getting more education and doing more healing, there's still something really similar about the being accepted and being safe. Yeah, and then so yeah, a little over 3 years ago, or about 3 years ago, um, just got a referral from one of our mutual friends to some great guides, and then have since taken that path on in a pretty serious way and studied with a few different guides. And you know how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a journey that I do think is not for everybody because yeah, I mean, part of me is like everybody could benefit from it, but there's other ways to access it. There's other ways to access it. It was ended up being my path, that your path. It's a difficult path, that's for sure. It is a
Mhm.
very highly difficult path, and it can be unhinging at times,
Yeah.
very unhinging. Um, in that past 3 years, what is the thing that you think that would be most beneficial for people to hear about that if they're wondering about potentially going down that path with psychedelics and psychedelic therapy and plant medicines?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it's always good anytime we have this discussion. It's great to talk about the benefits, but it's also really important to talk about the risks
Yeah.
as well. And there's so many risks that we could talk about, from untrained guides to lack of integration afterwards and things like that. But one of the things that I would say, I think really my Tai Chi and Qigong practice and my spiritual practice, there's a few things, but one of the things is my spiritual practice and my Tai Chi and Qigong practice has been one of the biggest things that has really helped me in that experience, because it's really given me a way of being mindful about what's moving inside and having the tools to be able to look inside, and also given me some containment to where I can hold the energies that are moving inside and they don't completely overwhelm me or pour out of me, because I have that centering and that containment and that relaxation I've learned from Tai Chi.
Mm.
And also, even going into medicine work, you do have to have an ability to surrender. You have to have an ability to let go and flow. And that's also taught me that. And so I would say for people considering that path, like, consider the risks, but also I would say maybe think about putting some frameworks in your life that can support you on that path, some things that can help you learn how to surrender and surf and flow, some things that can help you learn how to look inside, like mindfulness, some things that can help you to contain yourself and settle your nervous system and ground and center, even like ice baths and having that as a discipline, or breath work and learning how to do it through that. I think if you have those practices in your life already, like if you've built some skill, you're going to go a lot further, because you do have to have the ability to be mindful, center yourself, and surrender and flow. Like, so having some tools that allow you to learn that is, I think you could do yourself a lot of good by starting that before you start that journey.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I was talking to our good friend Marcus on a voice note about what I've been dealing with the last few days. And he said, "This is why you do ice baths, man." He's like, "You're in a life bath right now. Like, you're literally sitting in this really uncomfortable feeling, really uneasy, really not sure what's going on." He said, that's why you do ice bath. It's not this cool fad thing that people do. That maybe a lot of people do that. And he said, "I see people that do all these ice baths, but they can't sit with their own discomfort in their own life." And I was like, yeah, man, like kind of feel like that's me right now. Feel very humbled. And
Mhm.
but that's why you do it. And that piece of advice really helped me. It's like, well, I know that. Like, or even jujitsu, where you're in a submission or the threat of a submission is there, and you know that it, like, if you react emotionally, or if you freak out, if you can't center yourself, then it's over. And I
Yeah.
can imagine the people would probably get quite frustrated with Tai Chi and Qigong because they may be too stuck in their head and they can't like center themselves. And then they might get frustrated, like, oh, this isn't working. And then all their stuff comes up. But allowing yourself to do that. And it's just about like developing a relationship with discomfort. I talk about you want to like microdose discomfort every day in some way. It could be, for some people, it could be meditation. For other people, it might be learning a Tai Chi practice. For me, something I'm learning is slowly doing like a dance, kind of like my own version of Tai Chi without knowing anything about it, but very slow kind of moving my hips in a more feminine way and watching me hit shame in my own body. Like
Hmm.
watching me rub up against it and being like, oh, that's gay. That's gay. It's like all this kind of stuff like that, or like that's feminine. You can't do that.
Hmm.
And it's like, well, what is wrong with moving your body? It's just your body. It's my body. It's your body. And then allowing yourself to kind of flow up against that. And that's just another version of discomfort. Just
Yeah.
another version of just sitting with discomfort and developing that relationship with discomfort. So important. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, actually a little bit what I was saying about, having these centering practices is it's also important to know how to find comfort.
Mm,
So a lot of people I work with in my coaching practice, they're overwhelmed, they're anxious, they're stressed out, and they're in a lot of physical pain. And they're in a lot of discomfort all the time already because of that, And so if they're listening to this podcast, they're thinking, blah, 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 I've heard this discomfort thing a million times, and that's not really helping me because I'm in discomfort all the time in my life.
mm.
And one thing that my Tai Chi instructor says is, Tai Chi instructors, by the way, have this kind of tendency of like pointing stuff out that's really obvious, you know. And one of the things he says is like, if you're constantly seeking discomfort, then your life is going to be very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so, one of the beauties of these arts that I found, and I think is also just a crucial skill, is to be able to find comfort. Like, where can you go in your body, in your heart, in your alignment, in your centering, where you can find actually comfort, and then if I can find my alignment, my grounding, my center, then it doesn't matter. Not to say it doesn't matter, but it makes it more doable for me to go into the shame or go into the anxiety or go into the physical pain and feel that and remove that, because I know I can come back. I always have this sense of alignment and center. I get fall off it, don't get me wrong. I get pulled off it. I get emotional just like everybody else. I get overwhelmed, stress in my life, but I do know I have tools for coming back to center, coming back to comfort. If you think about an ice bath, I think one of the first things you should do before you do an ice bath is learn how to center yourself so that when you go in the ice, it's not about just sitting there and being uncomfortable. It's about how can you find the comfort in the discomfort. So it's
Exactly.
actually more about finding comfort, actually,
It is, yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
The
And
gateway is
so,
discomfort. The gateway to that is discomfort, but then can you find the comfort in that and be able to center yourself? Yeah, it's very interesting. It's very yeah, and that's why a lot of people, I love what you said, it's not talked about enough, is before you, if you consider doing plant medicines, learn how to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
yeah, learn how to find center, learn how to be comfortable. One of the biggest things, honestly, one of the hugest benefits in Tai Chi and Qigong and dance for just a lay person, like somebody who's not trying to be mastery or spiritual, whatever, is learning how to move your body in a comfortable way. Like, what would that be like? Just enjoying. What would that be like to just take pleasure in moving your body, you know? As opposed to, I think a lot of people, that is somewhere they hit their head against a wall sometimes and they're not coming to class, because there is a sense that if I'm going to move my body, it needs to be hard. If I'm going to do exercise, it needs to be uncomfortable. There's going to be no benefit if it's not super challenging or super uncomfortable. It's kind of like these ways we punish ourselves, really. And it's like, what if you just allowed yourself the permission to take pleasure in moving your body, to dance and flow and just find ease? Imagine that. Like, I really think that's a big hurdle for people is, what if ease is okay?
Dude, you're saying this right now, and it's like I can feel it in my body. Like even the shame I shared around like moving my hips a certain way, where it's only okay for gay men or women to move their hips like that. It's not okay for a straight guy to move their hips like that. It's like, well, why? Why is that
Yeah.
not okay? And it's just like, why can't you move your body and just feel the freedom of moving your own body? That's why dance is so beautiful. That's why Tai Chi is so beautiful. And that's my next path. That's my next journey of developing that relationship with myself. And it is difficult. And I love dance. I enjoy dancing. Um, but yeah, like what if ease is okay?
Yeah. What if that's okay, Yeah. In our culture, which is so striving,
Yeah,
you're not contributing, you're not a good, worthy, valuable part of society if you're not like pushing,
hustling.
hustling. Exactly.
That's what I'm
Right.
battling with lately. I'm battling with that, and I've been battling with that for a long time. Like it's okay to rest. You don't have to earn your rest. It's not an
Right.
earned thing. It's like you rest because you're a human.
Yeah.
And like we just live in a world where, especially with men, they see other men, and some guys like, I work in 16 hours a day, might make my dream happen. If you're not living your dream life and you're watching TV, fuck you. And there's a lot of kind of
Yeah.
that messaging,
Yeah.
which adds to that feeling of not enoughness in a lot of men. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
well, shit. Or if they don't look a certain way. And for a very long time, a lot of women kind of dealt with that from like the makeup industry and how they look. But it's
Yeah.
coming more and more prevalent with men of like, hey, if you're not rich or if you're not shredded or if you're not like, it's very damaging.
Yeah. 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 I feel that too.
Yeah. 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 It's a lot. It's a lot to talk about. And then I'm glad we're talking about it because it needs to be talked about. And that's why we're doing this podcast. Is like that's
Yeah.
why I hope you're still listening. Whoever's listening to this when it comes out, is that these conversations, especially between two men, are very powerful and need to be talked about more. And
Yeah.
I'm very grateful that I have you in my life and other men in my life like Marcus and just Jeff and there's other people that have been on this podcast. There, I
Yeah.
can. It's a safe place to talk to this stuff about. Where if you talk to this with a lot of men, they would just react the same way that would be hurtful. You couldn't get deep and vulnerable with them.
Right.
That's what the
Yeah.
biggest thing I noticed about talking about plant medicine work. And I used to go up a group of men, like you'll go around a group of men just in whatever, you go to a work function or whatever. They're always, it's a very kind of competitive environment. It can be very unsafe. You kind of got to put your armor on. The biggest thing I noticed when I went to a men's weekend and you were there is that we don't care about that here.
Yeah.
We're not playing that game.
That's right.
What's your thoughts on like men's work and how important it is for men to gather together and talk about these things?
I think it's important. I think it's important for I think the brethren is really, really important. I can see where, maybe critics of men's work, uh, yeah, I could see how it could be gone to the extreme or gone off the rails or encourage a certain type of machismo or something like that, depending on the group. I don't know all the groups, so I can't speak for all the groups, but I have heard some people who are um, critics of it, and I think part of the criticism is actually what you were just describing about the like more masculine is not necessarily the goal or the helpful thing.
Oh yeah, it's not good. It's not that
Right.
it's
So I
not
think
good, but yeah,
that's where some of the criticism comes from, but I do think that um, there is such thing as like men's issues, or just things that lots of men tend to face that it can be difficult to talk about in front of your spouse, you know what I mean? Or your other people in your life. And it's good to have people that you can talk about it. I mean, one of the things for me, I'll just share is like, um, I want to show up in a certain way for my partner, right? Which is a certain way of somebody who um, has a plan, has confidence, knows where we're going to go, knows how to get there, can take care of her, and it can be this difficult balance because, like, sometimes I don't feel like that.
yeah,
Sometimes I'm insecure about how I'm going to make enough money, or sometimes I don't know if the plan we're on is the right plan.
yeah,
And I'm very vulnerable with her, given the right space, but also there's sometimes where she just needs me to be strong, and it's helpful to have another group of people I can go with and be like, how did you guys deal with this or whatever, or even just spousal issues in general, like not to talk about the relationship, but just to talk about myself and, hey, I'm having these insecurities. How do I, manage my life?
yeah,
So it's really helpful. And also, straight up, even just when we back up off this serious shit and just go to like, the very superficial, it's like so helpful just to like play games, roughhouse,
yep,
just joke around, have, guys that are just honestly, like, most guys just don't have enough community in their life, and it doesn't have to be this deep plant medicine, like healing thing. It just be like,
no,
what, just hanging out with the guys, talking about life, whatever, that's really important. And what's also really important, and this is what I get from martial arts, this is what was taught to me in some of my first kung fu teachers, and I wonder if you learned this in your jiu-jitsu journey as well, but like that your brothers, and I actually really usually say your family, um but there's a certain amount to it about how men need to hear it, is like they're there to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear.
yeah,
But that's the difference between like friends. And this is the reason why sometimes a men's group or a martial arts club or something like that can be like specifically valuable, is because your friends, it's really easy for your friends to tell you what you want to hear and get on your bandwagon about stuff. But it's really helpful when you have brothers. And I value, there's nothing more valuable than someone speaks truth into your life. So I value it from any source I can get it, and I try just to humble myself enough to take it. And so I'm not to say that sisters can't do this for you. My sisters help me with it, but there is just a special dynamic. There's something unique about the way men challenge each other in a way, when it's not super machismo, but when it's a way when it's accepting and welcoming and loving and nurturing. There's a helpful challenge. There's a helpful competition that goes like, you know what, you actually are being a victim right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or you know what? I think you can do better,
Yeah.
or like I'm gonna hold you up, or like this is what I'm seeing in you, or whatever. That is it kind of that's important. Like sometimes that can give you a kick in the butt that you need, and it's kind of this special dynamic. So I think there's a lot of value. I've had a lot of value, from that, whether it's in martial arts or medicine work or men's groups. Like I've had a lot of value myself. So
Beautiful. Beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah, we could talk all night, man. We could talk
Mm.
all night. Um, is there anything that's on your heart that you're going through right now that you wanted to share to kind of be the last topic of our podcast today?
Hmm. Um, yeah, I guess one of the things that is I'm really passionate about, and would like to share or talk about is helping professionals. So one of the big things that I'm really passionate about and I'm really moving towards in my life is trying to be there for as a support for the helping professionals, the health providers who are really overwhelmed, who are really burnt out, who are in a lot of pain themselves, and who are really the first line in this um, consciousness raising that's happening out there, right? And so, um, as we try to go and improve our consciousness, and I think a lot of people in this show are probably people who are trying to strive and improve their consciousness and kind of try to up level the consciousness of the world. Health practitioners are the people who see people first on that journey, oftentimes, and so
Mm,
like I just want to recognize those people who are doing that, and I also want to say like the more we can take care of ourselves, the better we can take care of others. So I'm trying to kind of help these helping professionals to take care of themselves first so that they can make that positive impact on
yeah.
other people. I do have a free course available on this topic if there's helping professionals listening and are struggling with burnout or want to learn more about taking care of yourself first. Then you go to liberatedpractitioner.com, and there's a free course on there you can take, and I think that can really help a lot of people with the genuine care versus caretaking, spiritual bypassing, a lot of different things like that. So that's at liberatedpractitioner.com for those people who are interested in that. And then I would just say, for general, for everybody, like the more we can take care of ourselves first, the better we can show up for the people around us. So
Beautiful. Yeah. A lot of those people see like horrible things, like firefighters, police officers, healthcare workers,
plant
counselors,
medicine facilitators.
all of them, man. Like it's a lot. It's heavy work they're doing, and a lot of people kind of lean on them a lot. But like, what about them? Who do they lean on? And
Right.
bringing that to light and talking about that is so important. And if you are listening to this, and you do feel that way, go visit that website. And I'll leave links in the show notes here about that. And yeah, where's the best place for people to kind of follow you if they're loving what you're here talking about? Like, where can they find you and connect with you?
Yeah, so they can find me. The best place to find me and everything that I offer is at coachgabrielshaw.com. And then they can also find me on the social media, all the social media platforms at Coach Gabriel Shaw. So Instagram is good and YouTube are really good usually. If other people are in the helping professional space, then they can find me on LinkedIn. Again, Coach Gabriel Shaw. Um, yeah, and then so I'd love to hear from people if they resonate with this. I'd love to hear. You can find my contact information on my website at coachgabrielshaw.com. And then for specifically for the helping professionals, that course lives at liberatedpractitioner.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, man. I really appreciate it. Any person that got any value from what Gabe was saying here, go follow him. Go listen to what he says. He puts out a lot of free, valuable content. He does a lot of movement stuff on his YouTube channel, on his Instagram. He's always doing offerings. He's got Zoom things going on. If you live on the Vancouver Island area, there's places and opportunities to do things with him in person. But a lot of you don't. So a lot of you can connect with him over the internet, do Zoom things. Liberated practitioner, just like he said. And we had a beautiful conversation today. It was very healing for me. It was very beautiful for me. And I really appreciate you having you in my life, man. Thank you so much.
You too, Aaron. Really, really appreciate our relationship. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast. I'm glad we could make it work.
Yep.
Yeah, here's to more conversation.
Absolutely. And we will see you guys next week. Thank you for listening once again. Lots of love to you, and we'll see you soon.